We're back with another Legendary Lords power ranking by lore. And we're going to do all three of the Elven factions, the High Elves, the Dark Elves, and the Wood Elves together. Might as well. We have 17 characters, so let's just get into this. If you disagree, feel free to say so in the comments. Just be nice about it, because these are fantasy characters and we're just speculating. It's impossible to be technically wrong because none of these guys exist. Alright, number 17, absolute dead last, is Drycha, the branch wraith of woe. I mean, she's just kind of an angry dryad running around. A little scary in the terms of, like, children's stories and can beat up any basic Empire dude. Or, I guess, basic Wood Elf or High Elf spearman, though that'd be a little harder. Drycha's not actually that impressive as a combatant, to be honest. Her melee prowess is not incredible. Her magic casting is either non-existent or not applicable to 1v1 combat, depending on what sources you're getting there. She's more of an agent than she is a true duelist. Like, runs around, does things to better her forces and, like, free Coadil and all those things, but doesn't actually get in 1v1s that often. When she does, she doesn't win versus other named characters. Definitely the weakest of all the Elven characters, which are, honestly, the Elven characters are some of the strongest in the lore, so she has steep competition. She's just not up to it. Normally in this list, I factor in mounts to power level if they have a name. I'm going to make a rare exception for Lokhir, and I'm going to ignore Maelstrom. And the reason why is maybe my fault, and if I'm just wrong about this, feel free to call me a liar and put Lokhir wherever you want on the list, but I'm going to factor out Maelstrom because in any of the lore I can find about him, Maelstrom doesn't exist. Maelstrom looks like a Warhammer 2 inclusion to make Lokhir have a mount. But, I don't know, I can't find Maelstrom anywhere. So when I'm thinking about these, how these people would play out in the lore, it's like, okay, I kind of don't want to factor in something that was made up for one game. So maybe he has a black dragon, maybe he doesn't. If he has a black dragon, he goes up like 7 or 8 spots on this list. But from what I can read about him, Lokhir is exclusively on foot. He rides around on his dreaded Black Ark or on some Corsair ships and gets in duels with his dual red blades. He does defeat the High Elf Lord Aeslin on the seas, so he's a very scary pirate. But he is a pirate, mostly hangs around Ind and Cathay raiding, where he currently is now on the Warhammer 3 map. And he is the dreaded duelist for a reason. He is a very, very cunning duelist, and he has no qualms about breaking the traditional rules of combat to get a win. In fact, he cuts the legs out from under one of his own Corsairs and kicks him into Lord Aeslin, which knocks the High Elf off balance, and then he stabs him in that moment of confusion. So he is treacherous, he is ruthless, he is a very good melee combatant. But with lack of magic and lack of mounts, which I took away from him, so maybe I'm the bad guy, but I can't find Maelstrom literally anywhere in his lore. So maybe I just missed it. Warhammer lore is hard to track down at times. There's a bunch of White Dwarf articles and nonsense. But yeah, without any real mount options, I think he falls behind the other elves on this list, because most of the legendary elven lords are either magic casters, which immediately counter Lokhir's existence. Like, a lot of magic casters are spooky in Warhammer lore. Or they're better duelists than he would be. So. Lokhir, number 16, very scary guy. If he has his dragon, maybe higher, but I can't find it, so it doesn't exist. Up to number 15 is Malus Darkblade. Definitely my favorite of the Dark Elf books. Malus's story is very funny, and I like it a lot. It's also, like, it's not a comedy, it is serious, but there are a lot of funny parts in it. And with his Cold One mount Spite, Malus can be a decently strong melee combatant. Now, Malus alone is not actually that special. He's weaker than a lot of Dark Elf heroes, not even lords, and he's weaker than a lot of Dark Elf, like, basic things. Malus on his own, without Spite and without Zarkan, would probably lose to Hargoneth Executioner, like a single one, but he is heavily buffed up by those two. Spite is rather smart for a Cold One and loyal for a Cold One. So he has a mount that is reliable. And of course, Cold Ones are just spooky. I mean, he's riding a frickin' Velociraptor with armor, for gosh sakes. So Lokhir and Drycha would be hard-pressed to beat him. And he can turn into a demon, letting out Zarkan, which gives him Super Saiyan-like speed and strength, and a bit of magical abilities. Now, one of the problems is he doesn't let Zarkan out unless he's in dire straits. And then Zarkan also doesn't want to let go, so he could take over Malus's body, which makes Malus distrustful and not using the power sometimes even when his life is in danger. He would rather let Zarkan die out of spite than let him out. Can happen. That keeps him at 15 on this list because there's a lot of ifs on whether or not he's going to be his most powerful form. When he is his most powerful form, I think he is more than a match for Lokhir. And I think he is almost tied with the one above him on this list. But the one above him on this list has a much more controlled aspect of getting to their max power. So I just give him a little edge over Malus because, like I said, he might not pull that trigger and get to his max power because he might be scared of what Zarkan will do to him. Number 14 is Crone Hellebron. Now, unlike Malus, as similar to Malus, she is a solid combatant, but not crazy before she gets buffed up. She used to be. She used to be insane. She has been dueling, so she has been around since Malekith's, good guy arc, which was thousands of years ago. Since the first Phoenix King. Yeah, Anarion died, so Malekith is Anarion's son. Crone Hellebron knew Malekith when he was younger, and has stayed alive through, blood magic keeping her up. When she was younger, she was insane. She was, one of the first cultists of Cain, and ran around just, butt naked with 2 swords, killing tons of elves. So she can slay elves like nobody's business, and elves are some of the best combatants in the world, because they're all crazy fast. She's faster. Now, she's not in that form anymore. She is incredibly old and feels it, and unlike Morathi, who uses dark magic and sacrifice to get more of a permanent form of youth, Hellebron has to go through a blood ritual, moments before fighting to get to her max again. She'll have youth for, a night and fight through a blood night, and then she gets crazy old again and has a bad time. But, like Malus, unimpressive before. After she gets the blood right, she is insane again. Crazy strength, amazing speed, kind of pseudo-future sight. She can see blows coming and dodge them because Cain whispers in her ear how best to kill everybody she comes up against. And just her relentless attacks will be brutal. I think her and Malus are tied-ish, but her getting into the blood cauldron and coming out full power is her prerequisite to fighting anybody ever. So she's going to start the fight versus Malus at full power. Malus is only going to get to full power begrudgingly if he is losing, and even then he might just die. And I think Hellebron's consistency puts her above him, but just barely. I think to Zarkan, Malus versus blood-drinking Hellebron is a very close fight, and I don't know who would win. Number 13 on this list, we'll have Rakarth. Rakarth canonically has Brachus, so I'll give him Brachus. And again, I might be being unfair to Lokhir, but I couldn't find Maelstrom anywhere. Brachus is solid. That's linked to Rakarth. Rakarth himself is pretty uninspiring as a duelist. Again, comparing him to other legendary elf characters. But similar to the other lists we've done, when someone's on a dragon mount, that does give them a pretty big leg up. So do I think Rakarth on foot or even on horseback could beat Hellebron or Malus? Absolutely not. On top of a black dragon? Yeah, probably. Hellebron or Malus are going to have a pretty bad time against Brachus with Rakarth leading him. His whip of agony forcing Brachus into correct positioning and not to run around like a wild beast or get distracted. Rakarth focusing down his black dragon should be able to beat these lower characters than him. But not being a spellcaster does hold him back. And obviously his own meh martial stats will also hold him back a bit. But if you're also on a large monster, Rakarth will do significantly better than you than when you're on foot. So that is a little plus to him. His other mounted character is a little easier to deal with because his toolkit is specifically designed to keep monsters in check. So if you're riding something, he probably has a way of whipping your monster into submission or not making it do what it's supposed to for a while. He's strong. Number 12 is our first high elf on the list, Eltharion the Grim Warden. Riding Stormwing. Similar to other Griffin mounts and whatnot, he has the capacity to fly and good armor-piercing, strong mount options. It is weaker than a dragon in a lot of cases. He duels with Malekith at one point during the second invasion of Ulthuan. Doesn't have a good time fighting that dragon mount, really. His martial prowess was better than Malekith's because he kind of surprised him and whatnot, but just Stormwing was not able to keep up with a dragon mount, much less Seraphon. So, it is hard to compare him to other dragons, but he is a hybrid spellcaster, not the strongest, not like Teclis, obviously, but he has a little magical mastery in him, and he is very, very skilled in martial combat. Lacking real magical items, though, like really powerful things like Sunfang or the Widowmaker or anything. Eltharion gets 212 on this list by almost purely his own skill, like his own skill as a caster, his own martial skill. It's just kind of funny that he's not like propped up by anything magical. And he has an okay mount, but compared to the other elven mounts, it's just not crazy like Brachus. So I almost feel sorry for Eltharion that I put him at 12th on this list, because he's trying so hard and everyone else has so far been getting a lot of caveats. But, you know, he's above 5 other elven lords, and he's the lowest of the high elves, though he is a Chad. Number 11 will be the Sisters of Twilight. We took a brief break to list off like a million Dark Elf lords, but we're back with the Wood Elves. So above Drycha, they do have a Forest Dragon or a Great Eagle mount. Again, as we mentioned, wow, all right, big guy. As we mentioned, dragon mounts do give a lot of power value on this list, because dragons are incredibly scary. But the Sisters of Twilight are just a little more spooky. I honestly think Brachus is better than their Forest Dragon mount. I would bet Brachus would win that fight, but with the Sisters of Twilight involved and Rakarth involved, that would go to the Sisters pretty handily, in my opinion. Both of the Sisters are solid melee combatants and deadly archers, and they have this linked destiny, the conjoined destiny, where if one of them dies and the other one doesn't for a long enough time, the other one just comes back. So they're very, very scary in melee. You are fighting a 2v1 against 2 characters who are more than up to the task of dueling with people we've mentioned so far. Like, Lokhir would beat one of the sisters. He wouldn't beat both of them. And then you factor in the Forest Dragon, and I think Lokhir's doomed. You could do similar things for other stuff. Like, Malus would lose, in my opinion, Malus would lose 1v1 against either of the Sisters of Twilight. Then he would turn into Zarkan. And, no, sorry, he would have Spite. So Spite and Malus would lose to both the Sisters of Twilight. And if he turned into Zarkan, he would lose to both the Sisters of Twilight and the Dragon. So there's just kind of too much for the other people on this list, because you are fighting a 2v1 at best, a 3v1 at worst. Actually, a 4v1 at worst if they summon the Eagle somehow, too. Like, one's riding the Forest Dragon, one's riding the Eagle. But, yeah, they're powerful enough, but are number 11 on this list, not even breaking top 10. Elsewhere, we have the King of the Wild Hunt at number 10, Orion. Orion comes around, I believe it's every spring, and he fades every fall, as an elven champion is chosen to be sacrificed and embody the spirit of all the Wood Elf kings past, plus Kronos, the god of the hunt. Orion is powerful. Orion is scary. No mount options holds him back a little bit, but his ability to chuck his gigantic spears at things as he runs around is pretty devastating. Incredible martial prowess, very, very strong, has like some of the powers of a god in him. The only reason he's not higher on this list is because he kind of gets done dirty in the end times a little bit, where Tyrion kills him off screen without much of a fight. So that holds him back a little bit. But even without that, the stories I've read about Orion not in the end times don't strike me as he'd be that powerful. Like, okay, he is powerful, but not as powerful as the 9 other most powerful elven characters, because he just kind of lacks foresight and agency. He tends to just sprint at things and burn down Bretonnian houses or kill whoever happens to be in his way at any time. And I think there would be a lot of easy ways to scheme and like catch Orion out, because he's easy to bait into traps. Just looking at the top 9 on this list, I think any of them could deal with Orion easily, and I think that keeps him out of that, obviously. So he's very strong, but I can't see him beating anybody above. At number 9 on our list will be Alariel the Everqueen. While the Everqueen is very powerful, has a lot of good supportive stats, can summon weird rainbow bridges to teleport across Ulthuan. She is limited by several things that keep her not from being higher on this list. She is kind of like Katerin that we discussed in a different list. She is bound by the spells, by the health of Ulthuan. So she gets her power from Ulthuan, and if she's not on that island, she's a lot less scary. Or if Ulthuan's not doing well, she's a lot less scary. She frequently gets captured or harassed by Malekith and Morathi, kind of being a damsel in distress perpetually. While when she gets angry, she is very powerful and spooky and scary to a lot of characters, keeping her above Orion and that sort of thing. Her mastery of the lore of life gives a ton of healing and a ton of support, but she can also summon trees to just, like, murder you. That is spooky, but she's also very temperamental in her power, where, like, I am Alariel, the goddess of all things. I am so spooky. Ooh, a tree is sick somewhere. I can't move. I'm down. I'm out. I don't know. In the books, she's often kind of undercut from being crazy powerful by just needing to be the damsel in distress for Tyrion to go save. It clips her wings a little bit. She's still more powerful than Orion and the sisters, just from being the frickin' Everqueen. Like, if the Sisters of Twilight tried to land on her or anything, a bunch of trees would shoot up, grab their forest dragon, wrestle it to the ground, and the sisters would jump off and try and hit her, and she would just, like, blind them with some light and then stab the hell out of them while they're blinded. So I can't imagine them or Orion beating Alariel, but I think there is a decent gap between her and number 8 on this list. So, rip Alariel. Number 8 is Alith Anar. Alith Anar. So, I think Total Warhammer does the moonbow a little bit dirty. The moonbow is a gauze cannon. When he fires it, it goes almost infinite range, and at one point he fired it, and it went through a Cold One's head, the rider's chest, leaving a giant hole in it. Not like an arrow-sized hole, like a giant hole in it. Killed the rider behind him, and then killed the Cold One behind that rider. So, the moonbow is pretty freaking insane, putting him above Alariel in my opinion, because his power is more consistent. And in the end times, Tyrion and Malekith are fighting. Tyrion's trying to get the Widowmaker, and Malekith's trying to stop him, and Alith Anar shows up and almost kills Malekith, but then Teclis saves Malekith by whisking him away at the last second. But Alith Anar pretty much assassinates Malekith at one point. And then in a different point, the second time in the book, Alith Anar shows up while Malekith and Tyrion are fighting at the Vortex, and Alith Anar decides to shoot Tyrion instead of Malekith and saves Malekith. So both times in the end times who will rule the elves fight, Alith Anar shows up and actually decides who wins. And I do think that also puts him above Orion. That was the biggest thing, is like wherever Orion it was, I thought Alith Anar should be higher, because the moonbow can definitely punch through Orion, and Orion's just so reckless and not really caring what's going on that Alith Anar could easily set a trap or just stay out of sight and like line up a shot on Orion and blast his ass. But it was harder for me to figure out whether Alariel or Alith Anar was stronger. So that one's up for debate, but I feel like I can't see a scenario where Orion beats Alith unless Alith Anar for some reason is spawned into the middle of a desert with nowhere to hide, and Orion knows he is there, and Orion knows he is hostile and sprints straight at him, and then even then Alith might moonbow him straight through the chest. So I don't know. But it seems like a lot of setup for like, and then Orion can beat Alith. So Alith, spooky, scary archer Batman of the High Elves, takes number 8. Number 7, and the most powerful of the Wood Elf legendary lords. There is a caveat, but Durthu will be our legendary lord that is the strongest for the Wood Elves. Durthu is one of the oldest treemen, and with the Sword of Daith given to him by the Elven god Daith, he is a very spooky combatant. Durthu is perpetually pissed off, and is one of the most fearsome guardians of the forest. In the end times, he is defending Alariel. Even when she is an incarnate of the lore of life, he is stronger than her, pushing back forces that were about to kill her, keeping her safe from harm. So he definitely is higher than Alariel on this list, because in the lore, he is demonstrated to be stronger several times. A frequent ally to the elves, though he is a bit begrudging about it, Durthu's anger perpetuates him through the ages to constantly fight the enemies of Athel Loren and keep the forests safe. And he has a love-hate relationship with the other elves. But Durthu is the Elven Godzilla. He's great. Great. Love Durthu. Number 6 on our list is Tyrion himself. Now, Tyrion is the best duelist the elves had. Is the best duelist since Anarion. He wears Anarion's armor, he has Sunfang, and he has the Lord of all Horses, Shadowfangs, or I think it's Mahalandrunir, or whatever, for the elves, but it's Shadowfangs from the Lord of the Rings. So, Tyrion's pretty spooky. He is held back on this list. He's stuck at number 6, because while he is martially better than everyone else above him, he is not a spellcaster, which holds him back significantly, and he has no capacity to fly, which also does hold him back quite a lot. In the end times, he becomes the avatar of the lore of light after dying, and he did seize the Widowmaker at one point. But both of those are kind of the doom of Tyrion, so I don't know if I really count them. Like, okay, the Incarnate is just nonsense, silliness, and whatever, and I haven't counted it for any previous Incarnate, but yeah. And then the Widowmaker stuff, anybody can grab it, but it drives Tyrion mad, so I guess if Tyrion grabbed the Widowmaker like he did in the end times and lost his soul to Cain. And then he's the incarnate of Cain, so is it even really Tyrion anymore? Whatever. If he has the Widowmaker, he is above number 5, 4, and 3 on this list. So with the Widowmaker, when he is incarnate of Cain, he is number 3 on this list, sure. But I think at that point, the Tyrion you knew is dead, so the Tyrion I'm ranking is also dead. And that's just Cain. And it's like, yeah, okay, Cain himself is freaking 3 on this list. Cool. But, yeah. Tyrion's spooky. In the lore, he is a little bit dumb. He doesn't mean to be, but the authors write him in a very dumb way, and he's kind of a big dumb guy. So... yeah. Tyrion, he's around. Number 5 is Teclis, the lore master of Hoeth himself, as we have a star dragon in the background. Gonna turn this way and stare over the brooding ocean. Sure, Teclis, sure. Anyway, Teclis does not get the benefit of his Arcane Phoenix mount that he has in Total Warhammer. That is fraudulent. Teclis hates riding flying mounts, and I think he does in one Gotrek and Felix story for a brief portion, but it's just to get him from one place to another, and then he ditches that. He never goes into combat on a mount, maybe a horse, but even then he usually is on foot. Teclis is the best spellcaster maybe in the entire world. Actually, yes, in the entire world, without maybe one other exception on this list, maybe debatably. Mixed Lords of Spell Magics. He taught a lot of the Empire how to do any magics. Brother of Tyrion. Spooky, scary guy. And when he really puts his mind to it, he can obliterate entire armies. Like, there's this one, the second invasion of Ulthuan, after the Vortex gets messed up for a bit, he gets slammed with a bunch of magical power, and he uses it to breathe white fire over an entire Dark Elf army and kills them all. Now, that might be a little bit of incarnate talk, even though that one's not the end times. But like Tyrion, I said when he has the Widowmaker, he's really high. But at that point, Tyrion is dead. I think the Vortex shutting down and imbuing Teclis with power briefly before it started back up, that's also a little temporary, so maybe not fair. But just saying Teclis is dangerous with all of his magics. And I don't think his brother Tyrion could stand up against him if both knew that they were about to fight. I don't think Tyrion would get to him before Teclis's magical prowess would just like crush Tyrion or net him in place or push him up into the air and just let him fall to his death. Like, magic is better than dueling in almost every case, and I just think Teclis would have the edge over Tyrion. It's close, though. If you told me Tyrion would beat Teclis, that's fine. It depends. I think it depends on your parameters. If they're in a small enough space, then if Tyrion can get to him, yeah, Teclis is dead. Easy. Easy peasy. But depending on the distance between them, Teclis would win before Tyrion even got in contact. Number 4 and most powerful of the High Elves, Black Knight, I got your back. For everyone else, fight me. It is Imrik. And you know why it's Imrik? Because Imrik is the frickin' best. Now, I know the second invasion of Ulthuan was a little bit embarrassing, and Imrik just chanted to the dragons in a cave, and they all ignored him until the vortex that made Teclis full of fire woke them up, and then they were like, oh, hey, Imrik, and then rode out to go fight Malekith. I know, that was a bit embarrassing. But aside from that, on top of his Star Dragon, Imrik has the Lord of Dragons, so dragons respect him and listen to him more than any other elf, and honestly, without him, they might have gone to bed permanently a long time ago. Imrik is a fearsome combatant with the Star Lance on top of his dragon, and as we've said several times, dragon mounts give a lot of credence, Jesus, in this list. So dragons are very scary mounts. What puts him above like Rakarth and his Black Dragon is Imrik is just a vastly superior combatant to Rakarth. So dragon versus dragon, Star Dragon beats Black Dragon every time, and then Imrik bodies Rakarth's ass. But the thing about Imrik that gets him to number 4 on this list above Teclis is just how freaking good and courageous and heroic and enduring Imrik is. I'm probably being biased, but I still think with his Star Dragon mount, he'd beat Teclis, because Teclis is usually on foot, I remind you. So a Star Dragon and Imrik landing on Teclis can't kill both of them in time. But Imrik, in the end times, doesn't become an incarnate. He supports Malekith and Teclis's bid for the throne for some reason. That one's stupid. That's bad plot writing. But anyway, he leads the armies against Widowmaker Tyrion. He leads armies against Widowmaker Tyrion and doesn't die. He doesn't beat Tyrion, but he doesn't die, which against Widowmaker End Times Tyrion is very impressive, while Malekith is recoalescing his power and he's sitting in Calador forever trying to get his shit together. Imrik's out there fighting Widowmaker Tyrion and staying alive, which is crazy. Then, when everybody else gets incarnate powers in the end times, and his Star Dragon died off screen, so Imrik's on a horse. Imrik fights infinite tides of beastmen outside Athel Loren while the council just sits around arguing about what to do. Imrik's out there leading the armies. Imrik is constantly fighting Gorbals and Doombulls and legendary beastmen characters and not dying and staying alive, and even joins the final fight for Middenheim. And he charges alongside Karl Franz, leading a mixed troop of Dragon Princes and Demigryph Knights uphill into demonic hordes. And he still isn't dead. He's the only non-incarnate in the end times to do badass shit. Imrik's just amazing. He's just fantastic. And he overcomes the capacity, the lack of capacity to do magic with his Star Dragon mount and his superior combat prowess. Imrik is the most powerful of the High Elves. Fight me. So for my list of the most powerful legendary lords overall, we will take all 24 factions' most powerful lord and compare them to each other. So Ariel will not be on that list, but she does deserve to be on this list just as a caveat because people will get annoyed if she's not here. She is a legendary hero though, so she doesn't qualify for the final list that I will make later. She is more powerful than Durthu. Ariel is just an incarnate of Isha, kind of the mortal form of that goddess. Superior reign over the lore of life, which again, as we said, is one of the most fickle lores ever, so that keeps her out of the 1 and 2 spots, but is a supreme caster of the lore of life, can control trees and all that nonsense, in tons of healing, magical foresight, all those things. She's a pretty piss poor melee combatant in like a dueling sense, but kind of similar to the Fey Enchantress we mentioned on a different list that probably came up before this. No spoilers where the Fey Enchantress is, but I feel like her combat wouldn't be her swinging things at you. It would be her like levitating slightly off the ground and being like, "You fool!" and like push you to the ground, and like your bones are getting crushed from like the force of telekinetic energy, that kind of thing. So it would be difficult to deal with her. I do think numbers 1 and 2 on this list could do it, but I don't think anybody below number 1 and 2 on this list could actually like get to Ariel to even do damage. So she's number 3, debatably number 1. I think 1, 2, and 3 are locked, but I think you could change their orders based on arguments, but I personally put her at number 3. All right, if you've been paying attention, you certainly know who 1 and 2 are because they're the most popular characters of the Dark Elves, and it hurts my soul that these two characters are 1 and 2, but it hurts my soul even more who is number 1. Number 2 on our list is going to be Malekith, the Lord of the Dark Elves, the supreme tyrant himself over all of Naggarond. Malekith is a very potent caster, probably only weaker than Ariel, Alariel, and Morathi. Well, spoilers, you haven't seen Morathi yet, and there's 1 spot left. Where is she? But Malekith is a very powerful magic caster, especially after he got that horned helmet of his as the circlet of iron. So he found it in the chaos wastes, and it makes him see the winds of magic in a different way. Like he just kind of constantly sees them literally rippling around things. He can reach out and grab them. And then he has a black dragon mount. He's had 2 throughout his history, but he's currently on Silifon, I believe. Silifon, being a dragon, probably is only second on this list to Imrik's dragon in power. It would definitely be Brachus. Silifon is supposed to be the biggest of the black dragons. So the second best dragon mount in this list so far. Malekith is also a very good duelist. He is worse than Tyrion. He is worse than Imrik at dueling, but I think he would beat everyone else on this list dueling wise. He has the Destroyer Sword, which can do a lot of magical damage and get through any barriers you have. So Malekith is just kind of the jack of all trades. He's not individually the best at any one of them. He is often hurt a lot by his arrogance and that kind of thing, but I think he's still plenty good enough to beat anybody else on this list. If he has a black dragon and he is fighting 1v1, he will beat Tyrion, in my opinion, because dragon versus horse is not that close. And then Malekith versus Tyrion, if Malekith just throws spells at him, Tyrion loses, because that literally happened. Before you at me, that literally happened. The second Siege of Ulthuan, not end times, not something you can wave away as non-canon bullshit. The second invasion of Ulthuan, Malekith is trying to take down one of the Lothern gates, and Tyrion's defending it. Malekith just flies into the sky and charges a spirit bomb from Dragon Ball Z, and Tyrion stares at him and goes, well, shit, and runs, and barely doesn't get off the bridge in time, so the bridge collapses beneath him as Malekith just bombed him, but Eltharion swoops down and catches Tyrion midair. So, like, even in non-bullshit end times lore, Malekith bodied Tyrion by just not coming down. And he needed Eltharion to fly him up to fight Malekith. Actually, Eltharion fought Malekith, not... Eltharion and Imrik fought Malekith and pushed him off. Tyrion didn't even, so... Don't give me that Tyrion could beat him. Tyrion can't fly, and in the frickin' books, that's a problem. So, Malekith would beat everybody else on this list besides Morathi. But why Morathi? Number 1 on this list is Morathi, and that's largely because she's beaten everybody else in this list before. So back when Malekith was younger, Malekith being number 2 is the easiest to compare to, so we'll just do that real quick. When Malekith was younger, but still in his prime, he got the Circlet of Iron. He was returning to Ulthuan to fight her. No, wait, he didn't have the Circlet of Iron yet at this point. Or did he? Or didn't he? Did he? Didn't he? Didn't he? Didn't. I don't know. He maybe did, maybe didn't. I forget. But Morathi's starting to lead the cults against the High Elves back when they were both still High Elves, and she was a traitor, so Malekith goes to run her down. And he gets up to her palace, and he draws his, like, magical blue fire sword and all this stuff, and he's, like, pretty much Tyrion. And he's like, I'm gonna fight you. She grabs his heart from across the room with magic, and she just stops it from beating, and he collapses to the ground like, oh my god! Oh my god, I'm dying. And she goes and lurks over him, and she's like, my foolish son, I can stop your heart from pumping. And I'm like, oh, okay. so she wins, and she just like doesn't kill him because she wants to bang him, and she's like, now get up and fight me, prove you're your father's son. And then they fight, and then he eventually wins, and I'm like, yeah, okay, you won in quotations, but at any point she can just reach out and grab your freaking heart. I mean, and then you're like, okay, well, that's young Malekith. Now Malekith, being super OP on his dragon, could definitely beat her. No, because he's too stupid. He, specifically because Morathi's his mother and he wants to bang her, he has like incredible blind spots when dealing with her. At one point, she betrayed the Dark Elves and let Valkia get into Nagorond for free because confusing end times logic that didn't make any sense, and I complained about it in a different video. But essentially, Morathi let Valkia in and wants the Dark Elves to lose for some reason. Malekith takes an entire army up to Grond to beat her up, and he runs into a magical barrier that only he, not his black dragon, can get through. So he's like, fine, I'm so powerful and so intense, I can do this. So he walks through the barrier following a random dark elf witch. That's Morathi in disguise. And he can't tell that it's Morathi in disguise. So she leads him up to like her chamber and then leaves the room, changes back into Morathi, comes in and talks to him. And when he went there with the intent of killing her, she tricks him into invading Ulthuan instead and entirely dooming Nagorond. And it's just like, no. So Malekith is way too stupid whenever Morathi's involved and just can't see through any of her disguises after literally thousands of years. So she could pretty easily, like, if they were meant to fight, she could pretty easily just send her, like, Dark Pegasus somewhere, jump off of it at one point when it breaks line of sight with Malekith, turn into someone else and, like, wave him down, and Malekith would land to be like, where is she? And, like, you know, Morathi would be like, she's over there. And as soon as Malekith turned around, just stab him, because for some reason you could never tell that she's just going to fuck him over like that. I don't know. So even if you don't think about how specifically dumb Malekith is into her, Morathi is probably the third most potent spellcaster outside of Ariel and Alariel. Very magically talented, a strong duelist. Oh, sorry, Teclis too up there, so fourth. But she's a much better duelist than Teclis, and her magic would be able to keep her safe long enough to get her close to Teclis or Ariel or Alariel to fight. And she often tricks Teclis because she knows Teclis is obsessed with magic, so she'll present him with like a magical puzzle, and he's like, I must solve it! And inside is a bomb that blows up and destroys the Tower of Hoeth at one point. So she's already beaten Teclis at his own game. She's already beaten Malekith. I just have a hard time thinking anybody on this list could take her with all of her scheming and stuff. And she like seduces Tyrion and makes him take the Widowmaker so she can marry him later or something. Like, she has in the lore beaten all of these other people at various points in time, so how could I not rate her number one? And I hate her. This isn't bias. This isn't some Morathi simp being like, ah man, she's number one because she's so pretty. I hate this lady. She's my least favorite. Whenever she shows up in the books, I'm like, god damn it, get off the screen. I hate you so much. I hate this character archetype that even when they lose, they win. And everything is just a scheme of theirs that relies on all the other characters to be completely idiotic for it to work. And she's like, man, I'm such a mastermind. Everyone else is a complete idiot. And I'm like, just stop being idiots for like 2 seconds. Anyway. Yeah, Morathi wins and I'm sad about it, but she's the best. She's the best. Stupid Slaanesh cult asshole. If you disagree, let me know in the comments. Don't be a jerk about it, and we're gonna move on. Whee! Roar.
Subscribe, yes.